What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. What is going on, everybody? What a victory. What a performance by Peyton Manning. I mean, Kirk Cousins, 509 yards, 4 touchdowns. Beat the Buccaneers in overtime, who could not play defense, especially down the stretch. But what a game. You know, we have had some Thursday night duds. We just had a Monday night dud. Luckily, it was a doubleheader with the Miami-Tennessee game. That game was very, very entertaining. And the Atlanta Falcons get a massive, massive win at home. Really back-to-back huge wins. I mean, the Panthers don't count. Everyone's going to beat them. But you got to win your home games in division against, obviously, the Saints and the Bucs. Now they go to 3-2. What a win. What a moment. What a win. That was a lot of fun. Obviously, Baker was excellent in the first half. His third, we'll dive into it all. We'll hit on a couple other things as well. Trading for wide receivers. And obviously, it's Fugazi Friday. So we'll touch on that, as well as the big European game over in London with Aaron Rodgers versus the Minnesota Vikings. I'm just going to start calling. They're not the New York Jets. It's Aaron Rodgers. But wow, that was fun. Before we dive in to some football, you know, I got to tell you about my friends, my partners in the official ticketing app of this podcast, Game Time. Very, very excited to use them again here next week, going to Dallas for a little college football game, little Red River rivalry. And if you want to go to any game, I had the Mets game on at halftime. Pete Alonso, boop, game-winning home run. It was sweet. And if you want to go to a game, a World Series game, a playoff game, you name it, if you live in one of these regions, obviously football, the NBA starting back up, concerts, comedy shows, you better hit some of these concerts because it looks like some of these guys are about to disappear. But before we take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time, download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code JOHN, J-O-H-N, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code JOHN for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. That game was bananas. It really was. There wasn't much defense being played, but the end of that game was crazy. It's hard because you're like, oh, that's what I'm going to go all in on. When it was 4th and 15, after really the Bucs were driving to end the game, Bucky Irving fumbles. Great play by Bates, who is just a stud. I mean, that guy, what a great signing 2 years ago by the Atlanta Falcons. But they get the fumble, so they get the ball back, down 3 with 2:48. Then that drives a disaster. Yet they still have 3 timeouts, and they decided to go for it on 4th and 15, which at the time, that's what I thought I was going to lead the podcast with, because I'm like, listen, this is insane. You're only down a field goal. Punt the ball, try to play defense, and you don't need to go the whole field. Then the Bucs have a disastrous drive. Obviously, there was an uncalled face mask, but there was also a holding, so really those should have offset, but still, there was no guarantee they were getting into field goal range. And even if they did, it was going to be a long field goal. But then they have to punt the ball back, goes into the end zone. Cousins with the great drive. They don't have any timeouts. That's multiple big-time drives in big spots this year for him, obviously the Eagle game. And he hits Drake London on the play where you're like, God, this is pretty risky. You're looking at the clock. You're looking at them try to snap it. They get it off. Then they take a delay of game where it's like they're waiting for the referee, and even the referee in the booth with Alan Herbie's like, I don't know what they're waiting for. And you're thinking that if he misses this field goal, he would have missed a field goal, where actually he missed 2 because there was an offsides. You rarely see that. Usually when a guy misses a field goal, but there's like a penalty and then they get another shot, they usually make it. He missed them both. He had one blocked, not totally his fault. The dude went untouched, and one of the easiest field goal blocks you'll ever see. And then you're thinking, listen, I don't know exactly who the delay of game is on, But, it's that unit. So when you're the kicker, you're the star of the field goal unit. So you're thinking, gee, they're going to lose with this disastrous field goal unit. He bangs it right down the middle. They go to OT. They win the coin toss. Once they won the coin toss, the Buccaneers defense, I don't know exactly. Obviously, they're missing two starting safeties. Their DBs were getting shredded all night. And Cousins, bang, bang, boom. And they score a touchdown with a guy, Hodge, who I think he had his first catch this season tonight. And a guy that, you're thinking Drake London, who's having a huge night. Kyle Pitts comes out of, witness protection tonight, has some moments. Darnell Mooney has really kind of become Cousins' go-to guy. He also had a moment early in the game or late in the game down the stretch, I think with like 5 or 6 minutes to go, where he's coming on like a deep comeback. Cousins has to get rid of the ball a little early, probably because he's about to get taken out. I think everyone on their couch is like, you got to catch that. By the time he turns around, the ball can't be that far away from him. It's coming. He drops it. Herbstreit says he would have scored. I'd say 50-50. Who knows? I know he had a little inside track, but that assumes he would know where to cut. But regardless, that looked like a devastating drop. Just absolutely bananas. And like I said, I'm thinking tonight when it felt like multiple times in the fourth quarter the Buccaneers are going to win. You're like, they're about to go 4-1. They just beat you in Atlanta. You're going to fall to 2-3, so you're going to be 2 games behind them. Though I looked at the Buccaneers schedule, I think next week they play the Ravens. It's not necessarily easy, but you're just like, God, this is a huge swing game. And then you end up winning it. And while you still have to go to Tampa and go to New Orleans, you did take care of business against them both at home. I will assume that Atlanta is going to sweep Carolina. So that's just a massive win. And there is no way around it. What a fucking game by Kirk Cousins. That's as good as it gets. I don't even care what your name is. Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Aaron Rodgers, 42 of 58 for 500 yards. Now, obviously, that last play, he took it the majority of the way, but how many deep outs, deep comebacks, just strikes down the field? And I get Tampa's playing awful defense, but he was just consistently peppering guys in stride. Both the quarterback play tonight was really, really good. They both probably, especially Baker, missed a couple that he would like to have back, but that was really, really high level quarterback play tonight. And we saw, as we see every week, when you hit him and you can make a move, huge advantage, because movement is not something Cousins can do. But like Jay Gruden said when he came on the podcast, 3 weeks ago, there probably aren't many better 7-on-7 quarterbacks in the NFL. So when he has time and he has a clean pocket, he can eviscerate you. And even the one pick, it was 4th and 15. I mean, all picks are not equal. And listen, what was he supposed to do? Take a sack, right? He had to get rid of the ball. Now, it was a relatively easy pick, but I think that's kind of a crazy call by the coaching staff. But regardless, you remove that play. That was what an elite game by Kirk Cousins. It really was. That was a masterpiece. And this was a guy that I questioned coming into the season. I'm like, this thing could get weird. You draft this quarterback really high. He's answered the bell, and he's answered the bell hard early, right? The Philly moment when he drives him down the field. Last week, pushing the ball down the field, getting the big PI where really Mooney was open down the sideline before he got taken out. And tonight kind of was just a masterpiece at home in that crowd. Arthur Blank I think every single week this season, maybe every single week until Arthur, no longer graces our presence, they're just going to induct someone to the Hall of Fame. A couple weeks ago it was him. Tonight is Matty Ice. Next week it'll be the Ball Boy. Following it'll be, who knows? You just never know where Arthur Blank's going to go. But that place was rocking, and Kirk Cousins, I mean, let's face it, their defense in the first half of that game was getting shredded. I mean, Baker Mayfield, I'm thinking tonight through that first half, I mean, they gave it 3 touchdowns in the first half, and they only had 30 points going to overtime. So defensively, they did much better job. Obviously, the fumble they caused was huge. But I'm thinking tonight watching Baker Mayfield and Kirk Cousins. But Kirk Cousins, he signed a relatively shorter deal. I think $100 million guaranteed. He's 36 years old, coming off the Achilles. Baker, obviously a little bit of a 1 year wonder, resurrecting his career. Tampa wanted to keep him. I looked at his contract, 3 years, $100 million, $28 million signing bonus, and $50 million guaranteed. So on average, he makes like $33 million. And think about the other two quarterbacks in the state of Florida. Trevor Lawrence gets $200 million, and Tua got, I think, like $170 million guaranteed. Obviously, Tua is better than Trevor Lawrence, but he's KO'd. Who knows? His career is completely in flux. And Trevor Lawrence, objectively, is one of the worst 3 or 4 quarterbacks right now in the NFL. And then you get this guy who you got for $50 million guaranteed, who has just completely resurrected his career. I mean, those guys, like, if I would have told you a couple years ago when he was in Carolina, because Cousins now has been good for a while. I mean, tonight's like one of his crowning achievements. I mean, it's by far the most yards he's ever thrown for. I think they said in the broadcast 460 was the previous number. Like that's as good as any, like I said, any quarterback can play. But you watch Baker. One thing Baker brings to the table that Cousins doesn't bring to the table is the movement element. Obviously, throwing on the run, and he was really he was dominant in that first half. I mean, the touchdown he had to Sterling Shepard, his college teammate, that's as good of a throw as you'll see in that situation. Because in the red zone, the field, obviously, I mean, this isn't breaking news here, is a lot wider than it is deep. So precision and timing are a must. When sometimes down the field routes, you saw it tonight with both quarterbacks, you don't have to be on time, perfect. You can still have your guy make a play, bail you out. There's just not much room in that red zone situation. And that throw was awesome, but what a night. Not a great night for the defense, especially Todd Bowles and his secondary, who just got absolutely shredded. But it's fun, right? Because Cousins now kind of has been well established, I would say, these last 3 or 4 years is a really just high end player. Now, he's never been considered a top 5 guy, but he's, I would say, pretty consistent falling in the category of somewhere like 8 to 12. And a guy, if you do a good enough job building your team, like you can make the playoffs with. And there's obviously a ton of value there, and people really like him. And to me, the Baker story is really cool. I mean, this guy was. I was thinking tonight, like if you're John Dorsey and you're watching on your couch, you're like, that's the guy that I drafted number 1 overall. The swag, the talent. I don't know if he's actually thinner, but he definitely looks like he's moving around better than he did in his younger, his first couple years. Obviously, there was a scene today, or I mean, a visual when they were walking off the field. I think it was on an incompletion on 3rd down when Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, I mean, these guys are championship players. I mean, Mike Evans is going straight to the Hall of Fame, and Chris Godwin has to be one of the better, 3rd down possession type wide receivers in the league. And they're just both walking side by side. It actually might have been after he was sacked. It might have been the play where he was shaking off his knee. But it's like they really like this guy, and they got something going. Now, that secondary and that defense, they got to get that figured out. They need to get guys healthy. It's not the end of the world as a loss, even as a divisional opponent, given it's the road game. But I think it's a much bigger win for Atlanta than it is a bad loss for Tampa. But it definitely hurts because they had the ball in position to kind of ice the game, and a fumble kills you. When their running backs actually like that. Remember 2 years ago with Tom, his last season? And this is where I think Baker was alluding to, because I bet Jason Light and Todd were kind of telling him, like it was just not negative, but they just had some serious flaws. They were, I think, historically one of the worst rushing teams in the history of the league. They might technically be the worst. And now with White and Irving, it's like they got a couple running backs. Obviously they both can catch. They run really hard between the tackles. They're both quick, so you can give it to them on sweeps. Otten's a very solid tight end. You got Evans and Godwin, and now Shepard's pretty solid. Looks like he's resurrecting his career. So like offensively, they're pretty damn good. I mean, I'd say the same thing about Atlanta, but it's weird late in the game. And I think even overtime, who's in there? Where's Bijan? Nowhere to be found. Where's Bijan? Nowhere to be found. And I don't quite understand that. I think we have to admit if they would have a do-over on the Kyle Pitts draft pick, they would take a do-over. And it's just, he wasn't bad tonight by any means. He's actually more productive than he usually is. But I think you kind of realize when you watch him play, he's kind of a bizarre player because he can't, his blocking is a 0 out of 100. If like George Kittle or Gronk is like a 95, Kelsey just on effort throughout his career is probably somewhere in the middle. Like this guy's a 0, brings nothing, but he's not quite quick enough to just spread outside. So you kind of have to motion him around and ideally get him on a small DB. But usually these nickel DBs, they're changing direction and their explosions really quick. And so he basically has to win on size, or if they're in zone coverage, just kind of sit there. But let's face it, I mean, they're actually lucky this Mooney signing looks to be really good because he's come right in with Drake London and Ray McLeod is pretty good signing too. He's been watching his career with the Niners, and he's a good player. So it's kind of crazy that they didn't phase Pitts out of the game this week, but I think you kind of see he's just a role player, not the number 4 overall player. But luckily, because of their talent and really because of their quarterback and his ability to kind of spread the ball around, and he clearly really likes Mooney as well as London, that it's not going to kill him. And God, that was just my heart's pounded. That was we've had some duds on Thursday night. We've had some difficult watches, especially down the stretch. And I've admitted this over the years. The NFC South isn't exactly my go-to division, but I think it's pretty fun this year. It really is. Atlanta's clearly a lot more interesting, adding Cousins. Baker Mayfield is just a fun watch in that offense. And obviously New Orleans, who has a big game this week against the Chiefs, who you guys know that I picked to win the division, which is not going to be easy. I mean, we got some work to do, especially I don't feel great they're going to win this week, so we got to start digging ourselves out of a hole. But man, that was fun. I love touchdowns, tutties, taking it to the house, in for 6. I call them tugs. Whenever you call a touchdown, one thing's for sure: touchdowns matter more at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. On the ground, in the air, special teams or defense, we do not care how they score them. We want to bet on touchdowns. And DraftKings Sportsbook is delivering. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something as simple like picking a player to score a touchdown or how many touchdowns will be in a game. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your pick. Ready to do a touchdown dance on your own? New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use the code JOHN, John. That's code JOHN. New customers get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Okay, I wanted to dive into something that obviously gets a lot of headlines. And Devontae Adams requesting a trade and is going to get traded and will eventually get traded. And obviously he's on the Raiders because he got traded to them for a first and second round pick, same offseason, along with Tyreek Hill, first, and a bunch of both of them got a bunch of money. And I think we all have to acknowledge that trading a lot for a wide receiver does not get you much. It really doesn't. When I think of the best wide receiver moves, obviously drafting them and extending them and keeping them on your team. But when you trade for someone else's wide receiver, let's look at the Raiders. They have been a joke since Devontae's been on the team. Let's look at the Miami Dolphins. We widely consider Tyreek Hill. The players just voted him the best player in the league. He's one of the greatest wide receivers of all time. Definitely one of the most unique players in NFL history. That team hasn't sniffed a big win, let alone a division title, let alone a playoff victory, since they've had him on the squad. So I get it makes headlines, and I'm all for the position. Like, it does matter. Vikings are 4-0. Justin Jefferson's been great. You go around the league, like, you've got to have good wide receivers. I'm not saying they're irrelevant. The Chiefs are an outlier situation. But I think we need to be careful about, like, the Jets. Now, listen, they'll probably end up with Devontae. Aaron Rodgers is running the show. Their chips are all in the middle of the table. But some of these other teams, even if you can get them relatively cheap, it only costs you a third rounder because of the financial situation of his contract, of salary cap space, of all the different variables, aren't you better off taking a deep breath, waiting, and seeing what defensive players become available? Because this doesn't guarantee you a damn thing. And you'd be renting them. I get why the Jets have to do it. Their coach, their quarterback, they're just all in. And if it doesn't work, it's all over and every one of them's fired. The coach is fired. The GM's fired. If Rodgers missed the playoffs, who knows? Maybe he just retires and goes to do ayahuasca in Egypt. But this notion that, like, and listen, I get excited for it. It's great headlines. I remember when both these guys were traded. If you could do it over again, you could argue, well, the Dolphins, he's been important. I'm like, yeah, but for what? Now, that's made them relevant. Like they've won some games, but they can't win the division. Honestly, it hasn't even been that close. And last year, they started with like a 3-lap lead. I mean, the Raiders, no one would argue that if they could do it over again, they 100% would have turned down this trade. It's been a disaster for them because you have to overpay these guys now. You just do. When you have to pay a wide receiver 30, 35, $40 million here soon, you better be very careful. And if he's your guy, totally understand it. And I get why the Minnesota Vikings pay Justin Jefferson. Hell, I didn't even agree with Brandon Ayuk. I'm like, I'd probably just move on. I don't love paying this guy this much money, but I do understand it. You drafted him. He's produced for you. But like when a guy's available, when are other people that make a ton of money in the NFL ever available? When are top pass rushers ever? Like TJ Watt. Khalil Mack getting traded is an all-time outlier situation. These guys never get traded. Ever. When are like, great left tackles on the never happens. Laramie Tunzel got traded to the Houston Texans. Why? Because they were trying to tank for Burrow, and then Flores at the end of the season refused and led him to Tua instead of Joe Burrow. But like this trading for wide receivers gets a lot of headlines. I think we could argue it's pretty bad for business. I'm excited for this game. I'm disappointed it's at the time because for those of us on the West Coast, 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific kickoff. It's I like turning on my football at 10 a.m. on Sundays, but listen, it could be digging ditches. I do think this game's pretty interesting because I was listening to Belichick, who has like 17 podcasts, and he does like this video podcast with Lombardi and Patricia. Patricia speaks to Belichick like you would your father or your boss. It's just clear who the alpha is and clear who the beta is. And Patricia says nothing. It's like, says nothing. It's like, Matt, you're not in the NFL right now. You're sitting with Bill and Lombardi, who are willing to say, you talk like you're at the podium for a team. You're not. You got run out of the league and you'll go back when Bill takes you, but you're allowed to give your actual opinion on things, not just the cookie cutter, boring ass version. You're in the quote unquote media now, buddy. Give me something. Every time when it's Lombardi, Belichick, and Patricia, they go to Patricia. I'm like, oh my God, cut off it. Like one of the debates, cut off the mic. Because listen, I know for a fact, like every human being, you have opinions. You just refuse to give them. Even Bill, you can tell like early on in this, he was letting him fly. I think he knows I'm coming back here relatively soon, but he'll still pick his spots. He'll still say some things. But one thing he mentioned for Minnesota is that Minnesota, so far through 4 games, has had the lead in all but 4 minutes. All but 4 minutes. If you do the math, 4 games, 60 minutes, that's 240 minutes. So they have completely controlled every game they've been in. All of their sacks, except one, have come from the lead. So they have completely boat raced and owned people from the jump. Right? If you're watching one of these UFC fights and a dude gets clipped 30 seconds in and it just rattles him the rest of the fight, he's kind of on the defense. And that's what the Ravens have done the last 2 weeks. They've come out of the gates like gangbusters. To me, the way for the Jets to have a chance to win this game, like one thing we've learned, when they get into a little adversity, zero faith. They have no sweat equity together. I don't even know if they like each other that much. They will fold like a fucking cheap tent. But the one way they can win, especially against this team who is humming, is make them fight through some adversity. I think the only way the Jets can win this game is if they come out the gates and get an early lead and gain control of the game in the first quarter. If they're up like 10-0 or 13-3 or something at the end of the first quarter, I think they would have a chance. But I see zero ability for them to get down against the Vikings because the Vikings are not comfortable playing this way. They are dominating playing this way. They get an early lead, a touchdown or two, and then they suffocate you. Even if you have a comeback like the Packers just did, too little, too late. And I promise you, the Jets would not be able to stomach a comeback like the Packers just did. So if the Jets and Aaron Rodgers are going to win this game, because let's face it, they are on the roller coaster season. When they win, everyone will just give them a nice little slurp job, give them a nice little taint tickle. When they lose, it'll feel like everyone's getting fired at any moment. And that's just what they've signed up for. And this could be an awesome win. It really could. You beat the 4-0 Vikings, who passed the eye test, passed the statistical test, passed the coaching test. The last two quarterbacks, ironically, in this game, comeback player of the year, Geno Smith. Last year, Joe Flacco. This year, Sam Darnold. I mean, three former Jets quarterbacks. But I don't know. I think the only way the Jets can win this game is to get an early lead. And not just like, 3-0 or 6-0. I'm talking like double, like multiple scores. Can you be up 10-0 at the end of the first quarter? Where it's like, okay, let's see the Vikings, who have just not been down literally at all this season. Let's see. Like, no one can argue or dispute what we've witnessed them do. But when you're always playing from in front, like, it's easy to, I could walk into any bar in America and pick on no matter who's in the bar if Trent Williams is sitting right next to me. Or if I walked into the bar with Chuck Liddell on my back shoulder, but can feel invincible. Doesn't feel the same when you just walk in by yourself. You might not be picking the same fights. And not saying some guys might be able to handle their own. Some guys might not be able to handle their own. And I want to just learn that about the Vikings. And maybe this is just a year where 90% of the games, they just jump on top and they just take over. Before we get out of here, obviously it's Fugazi Friday. And one Fugazi we've talked a lot about when we first instituted Fugazi Fridays. The number one thing was tipping, which is obviously problematic in this great country we live in. Well, recently Starbucks shit canned their CEO. Their stock was in the tank. Obviously, you went there. They were out of whack. I mean, the company needed a reset. And they hired this guy from Chipotle, who actually had come from Taco Bell. Really impressive. And his deal, I mean, he got like a $20 million signing bonus. He gets to work from home, the headquarters. They put a bunch of people down with him in Newport. If he does fly up to the headquarters in Seattle, they got the PJ. It's only a couple days a week. It's a great deal. I mean, it's he's already claimed, like, every morning I work out, I get to the office. He does like a 9 to 4. This guy's a badass. I've gone through the Starbucks line twice in the last week, and forever they'd hand you, if you pay with card, right, the card reader. And when they hand you the card reader, obviously it's like 30, 50, 100% tip. The last two times she's taken my card, handed me my 2 venti iced coffees, and just paid $10 or $12 or whatever they came out to be. Tip option wasn't there. I'm not saying Starbucks has gotten rid of the Fugazi of tipping on $15 coffees, because I can't speak for every Starbucks in America. But I know the one I go to here in North Scottsdale. I wonder if there's been a company mandate to throw this out, to end this long-running, long-standing Fugazi in America. And the other one I've seen that I noticed last night, I was watching the Padre. Who are they playing? The Braves. Padres swept them 2-0. The series, the little mini series, right? So now they're going on to the next round. And that place in downtown San Diego was just awesome. And it made me think the Chargers should still be in San Diego. It's just one of the great American cities. I knew so many San Diegoans who were just great Charger fans. And you see the vibe and the buzz when the Padres are playing. Like, they're just so irrelevant in LA. And I get it. Maybe it meant a little more money to Dean's pocket. They built this great practice facility in El Segundo. No, but Jim Harbaugh is one of the most legendary football coaches of my lifetime and just football personality. So they got a lot going for them. They got a lot going for them. They will never matter in Los Angeles. They just will not. It's just never going to happen. And they had a place that was pretty special. And I get it. There were issues with the government. I'm not pretending like it was some perfect situation that they just flipped up the middle finger. But them being LA, just it's never going to truly work. I mean, hell, the Rams when they play certain teams are getting outdrawn in their home stadium 70-30. So, and they were in Los Angeles for a long period of time. Did it just like San Diego? Ah, man, that sucks. That really sucks. I wish the Chargers were still down there because it just fit. It really did.